Welcome back to Important Library Stuff, a podcast where library staff share the inside scoop on all the stuff that happens at Prince William Public Libraries. And trust us, it's a lot of stuff. I'm your host, Emily Bickers, media specialist from the Office of Communications and Marketing, and I am joined by guests who know a lot more on each episode's topic than I do, which for this episode is about our 1,000 Books Before Kindergarten program, our Storytime programs, and it's about developing pre-reading skills with young children in general. I'm happy to be joined by two repeat guest hosts, Youth Services Librarian Supervisor Amanda Thompson from Central Library, and Librarian Technician Rosanne Northjack from Manassas City Library. We'll also be hearing directly from a recent finisher of 1,000 Books Before Kindergarten, Cora, and also a current participant, Max, near the end of the episode, so stick around. Rosanne and Amanda, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you share your three favorite picture books?
This is very difficult.
I have a lot of favorite picture books, but I just stuck to the ones that I've done in Storytime that always go really well. So the first is There's a Dragon in Your Book by Tom Fletcher, Children Make Terrible Pets by Peter Brown, and Once Upon a Goat by Dan Richards.
I haven't heard of Once Upon a Goat.
It's the best.
I have to check that one out. I feel like I have to share one of my favorite books from when I was a kid. It's called The Tale of Martha B. Rabbit by Shirley Barber. And the illustrations are just so beautiful. It's full of fairies, elves, and it probably started my obsession with cottagecore. When Aiden Became a Brother by Kyle Lukoff, and a not as well-known Maurice Sendak book called Outside Over There, which is a direct inspiration to Jim Henson's film The Labyrinth. This is about a girl who has to rescue her baby sister from when she's kidnapped by goblins.
What is the 1,000 Books Before Kindergarten program?
So it is a program designed to encourage early literacy in caregivers and children bonding through reading. You read a book, you read it as many times as they want, track the number of books read. There are a lot of little benchmark prizes along the way. And at the 1,000 mark, the child gets a prize. They now receive a plushie, which is very exciting.
I think the big benchmark is the free book you get at the end.
That's too.
That's
Nice.
what we're always excited about.
How do you sign up?
You can go online to the Prince William Public Library website. You can also download the app, the Beanstack Tracker app, and register that way. And you can physically go into a branch and have one of the staff members there sign you up in Beanstack.
How early is too early to sign up?
It's never too early. I've had parents begin when their babies are newborn. I've had parents start when they're already pregnant, just haven't even given birth yet.
Yeah,
It's really, and then there are people who are like, my kid is starting school in a year, and they do it all in a year. So it's really just any time that works for you, as long as they haven't, before kindergarten. Some of them, I think, even go into kindergarten while they're working on it. So there's no wrong answer, really.
So babies can, it's said that babies can begin to recognize the sound of your voice at about 6 to 7 months. So it's even encouraged for you to read to your child and talk to your child in utero to kind of reinforce that bond. You could even sign up in the hospital from the app if you're feeling up to it.
I was chatting with a librarian at Lake Ridge, and when she was in the hospital, just given birth, hospital volunteers told her about the program.
Oh my gosh.
They gave her a book, and they recorded her reading it to her one-day-old baby.
Oh, wow.
And that's her first video she has of her
that's
baby.
so wonderful.
And she still, reads that book in her story times. Yeah, it's never too early. Rosanne, I know you're doing the program right now with your son.
Yes, I actually had been promoting this program since I started working in libraries, and it had its inception in probably the early 2010s. So when I gave birth to my son in 2018, I was very excited to be able to do this with him.
How has it been going?
According to my log, I started logging books for him when he was about 6 months old, and then COVID. So I really just hit pause on it for about 4 years.
That's fair.
But I never stopped reading to him. So I was reading maybe 2 or 3 books a day to him at the dinner table because it was one of the only ways we could get him to actually focus on eating. And my husband and I read to him every day.
Has he enjoyed checking off the books?
So I'm going to be a bad librarian and say that we don't use the logs at all. My son has a very short attention span, so getting him to sit down and color in every single acorn is just an impossible task. So I use the handy-dandy app, and I scan the barcode, the ISBN on the back. But I talked to him about the program and what we're doing and how much progress he's made. And we go to Haymarket Gainesville whenever we get a prize, and we put little stars on his little animal cutout. So he's very excited to finish. I feel like it's becoming more real for him now as we get towards the end. Like, okay, it's 1,000 books before kindergarten, and you're starting kindergarten. So I think according to when I looked last, we're about like 860 books.
Okay,
right
you have
now.
all summer to...
Yes, we're probably going to finish by the summer.
That's great. And it really, I mean, it shows how they have the logs there if you want to use them, but otherwise you can just...
Absolutely. And I even tell parents who come and sign up, like their kids are really into the logs and they're individually colored, and some are just, scribbled all over. But some of the kids just really get into it. And for those parents, I'm like, you can do it through the app if you really want to.
Yeah, sometimes they just have like a big check over them, like, we did this, which is fine too.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you noticed any changes in how engaged he's been with reading since you started?
Yeah, so I was a school librarian at an elementary school for a solid year, and when you read the same book to different classes over and over, you'll be surprised at how much the kids notice within the book and the nuances that they pick up. Quinn will make these connections out loud between things he's experienced in real life and the books that we read, and our stories often get interrupted with one of us saying, hey, remember that time when? Hey, you remember this? Or he'll say, Mommy, look at this. And he'll point something out that I didn't even notice. I can almost see his neurons firing as he's taking everything in. So he can't read yet, but I know he hyper-focuses on the illustrations like I used to when I was a kid. So he's able to pick up little Easter eggs that the illustrators put in.
Oh, that's cool.
His focus and attention span have improved since we started reading, because we moved on from picture books to ones that are longer and longer. And now we're doing short graphic chapter books like Sydney and Taylor Explore the Whole Wide World by Jacqueline Davies, or the longer Mo Willems books like his Unlimited Squirrel series, because they're very long, but if we stop halfway we can say to be continued and pick it up later. So he's slowly starting to pay more and more attention.
Great. Have any books particularly excited him besides the ones you mentioned?
He loves No David by David Shannon. David's this well-meaning kid, but he can sometimes be a little rambunctious and break stuff. And Quinn always laughs at his antics. I think Quinn really enjoys seeing another child push boundaries and be forgiven at the end of the book. Mm-hmm. He also loves books that are really silly, like This Is a Ball by Beck Stanton. Mm-hmm. And it'll say, like, this is a ball, and it's a block. And and you're just, you have to be the straight man and say, no, this really is a block. And I read that to his whole preschool class for Read Across America as a guest reader. And my favorite Storytime audience when I did Storytime in a big rotation was preschool, because they can pick up on that and they can tell you, no, that's not right, it's this. And you just have an argument with them, and it's so much fun.
Yes.
He loves it when we read books to him in a silly way where we mix up the words, or Jason will change his voice, my husband. I'm terrible at voices. I really hate doing them, but Jason is just completely unembarrassed and will read in funny voices. He really loves books with funny wordplay, like I Was Born a Baby by Meg Fleming, and he'll repeat the phrases he hears in books like, no way, no how, or Fergus McCracken, you get back here right now. And it's so cute.
Oh, Amanda, I know you've done how many story times in your life?
I've done a few, and I mean, a few, and they definitely, to Roseanne's point, like they pick up on things depending on the group, and it's kind of funny to see the ones that they respond to, like they mentioned the Once Upon a Goat one, like the older kids kind of understand a baby goat is a kid. That's how they end up with a goat, because the family, the king and queen wish for just want a kid.
And they get a goat.
That's funny.
And there was once I did the story time, this little girl goes, that was a good story. And it's very serious.
Kids are your best critics.
They're so funny. I like to give them things that are funny too, because I feel like that kind of engages them a little bit more if they can laugh.
It really does.
Mm-hmm. So Children Make Terrible Pets is about a bear in a tutu who finds a little boy in the woods, and she's like, my new pet, I'm gonna name him Squeaker or something, and the kids just think it's hilarious, and the parents like it too. And there's this whole, like, at the end, the mama bear of the bear goes, like she's like the whole time telling her children are terrible pets. This is not going to work. But then like the bear in the tutu, she's just like, okay, Mom, you were right. Like this was actually really hard. So. And then the mom at the end goes, yeah, they're terrible. And the parents all just laugh. So anything like things like that, where you can, I think, make people feel a little comfortable to laugh at, to enjoy like the silly things. And again, like connecting to them. Anytime I read a book about cats, I'll ask them, hey, does anybody here have a cat?
Oh, that's
good. And that turns into cat stories. And yeah, I have a cat, but it bit me one time. Or, like they tell me all about their wounds and it's hilarious. And we do there's one called Underwear about a bear that puts underwear on his head and then he wears it like a cape. And they all just go, those look like mine.
Kids love underwear. They just love hearing the word underwear.
Yes,
it's like
funny.
One of those bad words that isn't a bad word, but it's like, you said underwear.
It's so funny. And that one has a lot of rhyme, too, like in wordplay. It's like, there? No, underwear. And so they laugh and then they get the rhyming. And it's so goofy.
You're sneaking in those early literacy skills without them realizing.
Right, all through the underwear.
Right, all through some, and that's a good way that's a really smart strategy, not to brag about myself here, but if you get them with something that they're already interested in, then they're just that much more likely to keep on going with it.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. How fun is it to hand out rewards to participants along the way?
It's pretty good.
It's really fun.
It's very cute. Central made kind of like a prize wall so they can see the benchmarks of what they're going to get.
That's really awesome. That's really smart.
And of course they love picking out the book and they love to pick the plushie. Like we have the owl that they can stuff at home. That owl is so cute and it's so soft and they love that owl.
I feel like sometimes the kids don't care as much about what the prize is as they do the excitement of going to the library and picking up their prize. And the parents really do talk it up. Like, when we get to 1,000, well, Quinn keeps asking me, how many books have I read? And I tell him the number and I'm like, okay, when we get to 1,000, we're going to go to Haymarket.
Yes.
We're going to go pick up our prize. So if you hype it up, then they kind
they
of get
very
excited
proud
about it.
Yes.
1,000 books seems like a lot, but a lot of times in reading sessions, you read more than one at a time. Right. But even if you only read one a day, you can get it done in under 3 years.
And if you read the same book over and over again, that counts. Yes. If you have your child enrolled in daycare or preschool, like I do, the books that they get read to there count. Books that their older siblings read to them or their parents. So really, it's not as quite an astronomical task as it sounds because there's just so much exposure to books. In a perfect world, there should be a lot of exposure to books. And I think sometimes parents really worry about that. They think it's very daunting and, oh no, I'll never get this done. But we kind of tell them it's no, it's whatever you can do when you can do it.
Yes.
Do you have any tips for squeezing in reading time into a busy schedule?
I'm a big fan of our Wonder books for one. So those are good for the car.
I love that. Yeah, and Quinn has a whole stash.
So what is a Wonder book?
Oh, a Wonder book. They're a book that have a recording of the book embedded in the book. I'm saying a book a lot. They're very difficult to shelve because of the pop out, but it reminded me so much of being a kid and having books on tape that I would stick the cassette tape in and flip it over. But this all comes in one package, so you don't have to worry about losing any pieces. And sometimes very well-paid actors do it. Sometimes the author does it, and it's just they read the book out loud to you. And I swear, Quinn has hit play at least 5 times to read I Want a Dog by John Agee over and over and over. And so they're really great for that.
Yes. Yeah. I've heard of a lot of parents that'll come in that like them and they'll say they use them in the car when they're when they're on a road trip or if they need something to entertain themselves when they go visit grandma or things like that. Those times in between where you maybe don't think that would be a great time for reading because obviously you shouldn't be reading to your child while you're driving.
No.
I think it's those kind of little moments where that can really add up.
If your baby's young enough too, I had a lot of time being tethered to a pump and nursing when Quinn was very, very new. So during those times, I would read to him whatever I was reading, which may or may not have been the Hellraiser films and Their Legacy by Paul Kane. And then we would watch the movies together. But you can read them whatever you're reading at night. When my husband is putting Quinn to bed, he'll read him The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, and Quinn loves like just being read to. Sometimes, depending on obviously the content of the book, that doesn't matter to them as much as hearing the sound of your voice. You can listen to kid-friendly podcasts when you're in the car together. You can even like tell them stories. Oral tradition is so strong. We love to make up stories at bedtime, and that really helps them improve their vocabulary skills and the beginning, middle, and end, and they can kind of use their imagination in a way. So I would even say like think beyond the book and try and find other ways to hear stories and improve their literacy skills through just the words they hear every day.
One great tip I know we have, as we mentioned, is to bring your child to story times, because those books definitely count. Each branch has some on the schedule, which you can see online at pwcva.gov/library on our online events calendar. Select the Storytime event type tag to filter for just those events. So what happens at a typical story time?
There is no such thing as a typical story time.
No.
Amanda's been doing it probably more often than me lately. So what does one look like for you?
So, basically, story time, whenever I know that I'm going to be doing one, I prepare around like 4 to 6 books, but I will maybe read 2 to 3, depending on
having options is so
yeah
important.
Yes.
You can read the room.
Yes, exactly. Because like our story time is preschool, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's the age group that we get. So, and on one hand, you can say this is preschool, so you go to that level, but I still like to include the younger siblings. So, or even if it's a book where they're just not, you don't want to read 3 super long things to them. And you don't want to be too short either. So I try to pick, like, I'll start with something that's kind of maybe a little longer. Then I'll have something a little shorter, and then something that they can engage with. And we'll do some songs and jump around a little bit, and maybe I'll do a flannel. I'm still kind of awkward in figuring out how to make flannel, like, not so klutzy.
Flannel is difficult.
It's hard to get a stick.
I try to, and every once in a while, like if it's something special, like if it's groundhogs or Valentine's Day, like we'll do like a nice little craft project with it. I don't want it to be too much of craft time. But I do find that I try to keep it on, within 30, 45 minutes, just because you can see when you're losing.
Yes. Our toddler story time is about 20, 25 minutes, because after that, they're just done.
Yeah.
Right. And it's fair. Like, I get tired of sitting too. So like I totally get it. And in a perfect world, where the story time happens in this ideal way, like everybody sits still, they're engaged, they're like, wow, and they're singing, and it's all good, but that's just not how life is.
No.
And it's more fun to, you ask them questions along the way. I like to make it like little like book club. Like I like to ask them like little things along the way, or it's like, what do you think about this? Or do you think this is going to work? Can we do that? Or just like, is that silly? Has anybody done that? Like and just even like highlighting the absurdity and seeing if they can because they're usually catching on to it. But I just try to keep it, I try to keep it fun. And I do find like if I do things that are based around like animals or just super silly things, that they just have a lot more fun. And that's just more comfortable for me.
One of the best story times I've been doing them since 2011. Really long time, and I've seen a lot. The best ones, in my opinion, have consistency. So if you're going to be with this same age group, you're going to start with a welcoming song. You're going to have some hand movements, some dances, as you said, to get the wiggles out. It's a mix of books, flannel boards, and songs. You could even throw in like instruments if you're super good with that, but it's not necessary. And then you kind of indicate to them, hey, we're about to end, so you have a goodbye song. So really, when they know what to expect, then you can really like play with what you put in, because they'll start to trust you, and know that they're paying attention. When I was teaching elementary, I would see just the hypnosis that you talked about, where everyone's sitting down and being quiet, but it's because they're so into the story and they're so engaged, and that's a really powerful feeling to have, that you can really draw people in with these stories.
Mm-hmm.
What's your favorite memory from a story time?
A mom came up to me and said her daughter likes to play librarian at home and pretend that she's me, reading stories to her stuffed animals. And I honestly don't think there's a higher form of praise than that.
Yeah.
My most memorable story time was when the power went off in the middle of a story and everyone had this moment of panic on their faces. And I had a split second to think about what to do. So either the power was going to come back on or someone was going to come in and tell us to evacuate. So I just said to the room, it's okay, we're going to read in the dark. And we had these beautiful floor-to-ceiling windows, so I was able to see to read by, but I just kept going. It's like anything with improv, you just keep going.
Yeah, you just make it seem like it's supposed to happen.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So one of my all-time favorite story time memories, it was probably my first year in youth services. We did The Mitten by Jan Brett around winter. Yeah. And that's kind of a longer book, but it always works. They always just really like it. And just the illustrations are so intricate, and the premise is kind of absurd. So they're very invested in it. And I'll ask them questions along the way, do you think that guy will fit? Do you think the hedgehog will fit? What about this badger? And I'll ask, and just each animal. And some of them figure out that Jan Brett always has what's coming next in the little side panels, and others don't. So you get kind of a mixed bag. So one time, I think it was when we were getting to hedgehog, I asked the kids, I was like, so do you think he's going to fit in there? And this little guy just goes, no. So I was like, all right. And then I turned the page. And this kid was probably 3. And he just goes, oh, my God. So loud, just, oh, my God. This was the most ridiculous thing he had ever heard. It was just so funny.
It's hard to keep a straight face in it.
Yeah,
it was very difficult to keep a straight face. So I was just that's kind of
that's the best reaction ever. Quinn actually does react in a similar way when a story gets particularly absurd.
Yeah,
so.
I was this was just too far. We could get the bear, maybe the mouse, but then you get a hedgehog. No. So good.
Some people may have trouble seeing the point in reading to babies or toddlers because it can be tough to get their attention, and they're not always noticeably following along. But the 1,000 Books Before Kindergarten program and our story times emphasize the importance of developing pre-reading skills, and it's also a bonding experience with the little ones. What are pre-reading skills, and how do they help develop early literacy?
They are exactly what they sound like. They are, psychology, science-based, but they're just things that can help children with school. It equals, and having them understand and communicate, which understanding equals better attention. Mm-hmm. So it's oral language, letters, phonological, writing. I think there are several different webs out there as well underneath each of those. But there's just different little ways that they pick up on that, and it does help them with communication. Learning the alphabet, something like that.
Yes.
When having them draw the letters and or just draw anything and then tell you what it is. That is an early literacy skill.
Even singing the alphabet too.
Yes.
There's another one, phonological awareness, where you're hearing and playing with the sounds of words. So when you are singing the alphabet, you are literally telling kids through song how letters sound.
Right.
And that's going to help build their skills later on once they start sounding things out and learning how to read. I know I did. Most kids learn how to read by reading out loud or sounding the words out. So if you kind of front load them with what this is supposed to sound like, it's going to be easier for them to take these building blocks up as they start to try to learn how to read on their own. To me, pre-reading skills are basically the knowledge that children have about reading and writing before they learn to read and write. So it's a lot of practice. I know Amanda mentioned being interested in and enjoying books. That's print motivation. That's a huge thing with kids. If they are not interested in it, they are not going to come and approach a book at all. So you got to hook them in with something that they love.
Right. Yeah, and I think we've all been there where we don't understand something or we don't want to engage with it, or if something is in another language, then it's harder to follow. It's harder to engage with it. I think of if you listen to music in a language that you don't speak, or opera or something where you can kind of pick up on some of it, but you still get lost. And that's exactly, I think, how kids are, because they are learning how to communicate. If they are struggling with that, then I think they're just so much more likely to be uninterested in books in the future.
I feel like we have to plug baby story times.
Yes.
Because that is a very physical story time that requires more parent participation.
Yes.
Obviously, because your baby isn't going to sit up on their own when they're very early on. But in those, it's a lot. It's much shorter. There's more transitions, and it's like saying rhymes out loud, meeting a very short book, and then kind of giving babies time to socialize and play. And even just doing that is going to help babies as they progress to what they'll become toddlers. So starting as early as you can is really going to be beneficial for your child.
What are some other activities caregivers can do to help children develop these skills? You've already mentioned a bunch of them.
So I was just looking online at some things and also thinking about things that I did that worked for me. It's, working on their letters, working on drawing, even just having them turn the pages and telling you what's on the page.
Yes.
Listening songs, I think, and whether it's If You're Happy and You Know It or Simon Says, just things where they have to pay attention to the directions can really help them start to connect the dots. And then helping them recognizing their name. So at least having the letters in their name, and they can look at it and go, oh, that's my name. And connecting them to connecting the books that they love to things that they can maybe follow up with. If a child read Once Upon a Goat and was like, goats are now my favorite animal. Yeah. So you find picture books about goats. Maybe you take them to a petting zoo, and then they can be like, oh my gosh, that's like the goat in the ducky costume from, I don't remember the name of I think it's just Polly in her duck suit or something. But that's how you can kind of connect it with things that they're interested in already and that they're invested in. And it's similar to adults, it's really hard. Whenever people say that they don't like reading, it's just probably because they just haven't found something that clicks with them. It's not something, they don't have a subject or an interest that sticks.
Even doing something simple like going for walks with your child, it's free. There's a bunch of parks you can go to in Prince William County. Some of them even have story walks. And I used to take Quinn on walks in his stroller, and I would talk to him about what I saw in the woods. And I just, being a new mom was lonely sometimes, so we would go and just walk, and I would tell him about the things I saw while he napped. But I knew he was still hearing me. He was still listening. And now that he's older, we go on walks together in the woods, and he tells me about the things that he sees. Nice. So even something like going on a nature walk is a good way to promote early literacy. According to the American Library Services to Children, the best thing you can do is talk, sing, read, write, and play with your kids in whatever form that looks like for you. And just focusing on those 5 activities is a really great starting point.
Once children are old enough to read a little bit themselves, what library programs are there to help them along?
Definitely Reading to Dogs is a great one. We have kids that are not really totally reading yet that'll show up sometimes too, and that still counts. It's still turning the pages, and some of them will just sit and babble next to the dog, and that's cute. Or if they're struggling to read aloud, or even if they just want some extra practice and they're doing fine, that's a solid program for
Dogs
them to come
don't judge. Manassas City is also hosting an Adventurers Book Club in the summer for tweens, where we're going to read a book in June and July and do a craft and a STEM project associated with it. And I know 1 month we're reading a Minecraft book.
Oh, cool.
So there's lots of book clubs, too, that kids can get into if they're interested in exploring that.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about the bonding experience that reading to a child also is. Rosanne, do you think reading with your son Quinn has helped the two of you bond?
Absolutely. He's so big now. He's 4.5 feet tall and 55 pounds. So have him sitting in my lap. It's not quite the same experience as it used to be. But when he was little, there's just, I know there's science behind it, but it's the combination of like holding your child and reading out loud to them. It's like if you were playing The Sims, like the little hearts would come up, and it just kind of creates this like positive relationship with books that they have because you gave them this environment to experience books in. Quinn doesn't necessarily love all the types of books that I love, and Jason, my husband, has said, like, oh, you're a librarian. Like, this stuff comes easy for you. And I'm like, well, I spent a lot of time around books as a kid. I grew up in a family that also loved to read. So it kind of pays itself forward. But Jason kind of also connects to Quinn through video games. And they'll read the text in the video games together. So there's more than one way to kind of create that bonding experience. I feel like books will continue to have an important role in our lives and with bonding with him.
Excellent. Do either of you have any parting thoughts or tips?
Sign your kids up for summer reading. It starts in like a month?
Yeah, June 10th.
Yes. But it'll be fun. And you're doing a great job. I feel like as a mom, I have to say that to all the parents out there. Whatever you're doing with your child, whatever it looks like, we see you. You're doing a great job, and keep at it. Repetition is going to be your friend in this case.
Absolutely.
Oh, sure. And there are a million ways to do it correctly. At the core, it's about spending time with your child.
Yes.
It's bonding with them. It's participating in their, in their life as they grow up, and finding out what they're interested in, what they're comfortable with, what they're uncomfortable with. Making learning and reading something positive
and fun.
Yeah. So like finding things that they enjoy, that they love to read about, whether it's the dinosaurs, or I once had a kid during Reading to Dogs who brought a coding book.
Oh, that's awesome.
So just anything that, like let them follow that until the next thing comes along, because that's just going to give them a positive attitude about reading, because there is something out there for them, no matter what the phase that they're in is. And having it be something that's not just school-based, and so they don't have to think of it as just like a chore, like making it something that's joyful. And the more that you can kind of participate, I think, in that process as they're growing up, I think that's going to just create a better reading for them, like just better experience. They'll probably, more comfort with school, and just better in general. But again, to me, like, it's just, the big thing is just about spending time with your kid,
or let your kids see you reading.
Yeah.
That's modeling is going to be huge for them. So if you are a person that enjoys reading, whatever format that looks like let them see you doing it, because that's going to make a big impact on them as well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
That's great. Well, thank you both so much for joining me.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
I wanted to briefly mention that the fabulous prizes that make the 1,000 Books Before Kindergarten program so fun are sponsored through individual and corporate donations through the Prince William Library Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. You can learn more about the foundation or donate yourself at give.classy.org/PWPL Foundation. Every dollar helps. All right, I am now joined by Cora and Max to discuss 1,000 Books Before Kindergarten. What's your name and how old are you?
5, and my name's Max. Cora, and I'm 8.
What is your favorite book or favorite thing to read?
Comics. My favorite type of book is Cat, Kid, and Dog Man.
What's your favorite thing about the 1,000 Books Before Kindergarten program?
You get a free book. Reading.
What is your favorite thing about reading?
The pictures are cool. It was fun.
Thank you both for weighing in. I will close us out with a quote from the book referenced in the episode title, Don't Let the Pigeon Drive the Bus by Mo Willems. I have dreams, I also have an update about the podcast. Starting in June, we will be moving to a monthly schedule, and we'll be releasing new episodes on the first Tuesday of each month. Join us in 2 weeks for our episode all about summer reading, and then it will be a month after that for our next episode. Thanks for listening.